So here's when you would use create React app. The code base is already CRA and you are underpaid. The brain rot has gotten too deep, and it doesn't matter how hard the maintainers work, they can't reverse that. This is all my opinion. Thankfully, my opinion is right. Stick around if you want to figure out why create React app is bad. I had no idea what I was going to do this week. I had my calendar for guests shift all around a few weeks ago, and I forgot this wasn't a guest week until last night. And thankfully, as always, Twitter provided and gave me some wonderful drama baiting that we're going to dig deep into. If we can prevent one person from using create React app, this stream was worth it. We're curing a plague. We're saving the web dev world from a lasting scourge, a proper disease that has been lingering for a long time with nobody willing to kill it. And today is the day we are killing create React app. It's over. Create React app hasn't been a topic for a while now. Thankfully, it's dead. But it came up again on Twitter because Swix was drama baiting about how bad the web ecosystem is, talking about a very senior engineer who sent him this picture, which first off, I find it's funny that a senior engineer is taking a picture of the screen. We won't dig too deep into how senior or technical this senior technical person is, because that's additional drama we don't need to go into. But what we can see here is it looks like he's installing a JSON schema ref parser package from API dev tools. Interesting, because that very specifically suggests that this is a backend package. And what's particularly funny is the first reply I got, and the most consistent, sorry, not the first reply, the first negative reply I got to my tweet in here, and a lot of the things that followed up were, next is for server-side stuff, conflating server-side and client-side makes things harder. Create React app is one of the biggest bad examples of conflating server-side and client-side stuff. Anyways, let's go in here. So the problem here was they were installing a package that was specifically for backend use. And in order to get it to work on the front end, they had to install a whole bunch of polyfills and a bunch of other bullshit to make it work. There's two problems here, in my opinion. The first one is that a backend package was installed in a front-end app. I definitely will concede that in the NPM and JavaScript ecosystem, there is nowhere near good enough a delineation between a package intended for front-end use, a package intended for back-end use, and or packages intended for both. And as such, as a new developer, and even an experienced developer, it's hard to know when you NPM install something, what you're actually supposed to use it for. And we see that problem pretty clearly here. The other side is that create React app kind of lets you get away with it. There's one particular reply in here that nearly gave me a fucking aneurysm. Let's see if I can find it. It was in this Pete Hunt thread. This one killed me. This one actually broke me. And it sucks. I love Pete. I actually respect him immensely. He's just 6 to 7 years behind it now, and it's really sad to see. This, I didn't have the heart to reply. This is specifically this part. You guys can't hear me punching my desk because I have noise canceling on. So, as I just said, have conceded that the delineation between front-end and back-end packages in the Node ecosystem is not good. That does not mean in any world that we should polyfill FS into your frickin' web app. That makes no, terrible idea. We should not even be considering the idea of polyfilling Node built-ins. You do not call Node crypto on your client. What does polyfill mean? Good question. Polyfill means you wrote code that for any of many reasons can't run on the device that you're sending it to. So additional code that does that thing is run instead. So if you use array.map, but you're targeting Internet Explorer 4 or some browser that doesn't have array.map, it will, at compile time, create an old school for loop for you in order to make that .map work. A polyfill is code that uses old styles or supported styles to make an unsupported, usually more modern thing compatible. And the problem that we're seeing here is an assumption that if something's using NPM, so it's technically using Node, that it should polyfill everything you can do in Node, which I wholeheartedly reject. That is, in every sense, a terrible idea. The vast majority of the things in Node were built to run on the server because Node is server-side JavaScript. We have bastardized it into a package manager for client apps, but that doesn't mean we should just treat them the same. There's actually a new group that formed, the Web Runtime Standards Consultorium or something. It's part of W3G, the web standards group. And what they are now doing is arguing about what the base set of JavaScript commands and functionality should exist on all platforms, be it a browser, be it Deno, be it Node, be it Cloudflare workers. And seeing the standardization there is really cool and exciting. But man, this is one of the most frustrating replies I have gotten in a while. First off, ESM, once adopted, is going to solve so many problems in the web world specifically with package management and resolution. And on top of that, Node's built-in modules are not in any way, shape, or form built for the browser. And here's where we get to go all the way back to our main topic, Create React App. Because historically, and this is one of my favorite things about Create React App. Let's see if I can find this issue. Create React App crypto issue. I'll be so happy if this comes up. That's it? Yes, this is the issue. Cool. So this is the chaotic bullshit you're buying into when you buy into Create React App. For some reason, my guess is making it as easy as possible to npm install random shit and have it work. Create React App used to include polyfills for a bunch of Node.js stuff that probably shouldn't have been running in the browser, including crypto. So if you imported Node's crypto module directly in your component, that should not ever have worked because Node's crypto module is not a browser module. What they did for us was polyfill a bunch of those things, and then they realized probably not a good idea. Awesome. Credit to Create React App. They made the right decision with V5 in no longer doing this because doing this is bad. But due to the nature of engineer they have bred with this very bad pattern, users of Create React App now expect the ability to blindly npm install and blindly node crypto, node fs, whatever, at any point and expect it to work. So when they finally start following the standards and stop ripping random node modules into their web apps and then explain why this is a bad thing, they get 67 downvotes on their reply in the GitHub issue. It's so frustrating. I was in this thread. I actually don't know if I ever replied in this thread, but I was lurking this one for a while because, man, there was some dumb things. Okay, one more tiny side rant. The amount of times Web3 comes up in here says a lot, both about the average Create React App user and the average person who thinks installing a node module in their web app's a good idea. They're just installing random crypto things and expecting it to work in their Create React app. I think that's fucking hilarious, but I don't want to tangent into that for too long. The crypto world's its own mess we don't need to go into. Anyways, the reason this all happened is somebody installed a backend package in their Create React app, and Create React app failed to polyfill everything for them, and then they continued running into issues from there. The problem here is much less Create React App being bad, much more the bad mindset Create React App breeds, as well as the bad split of package front end and back end, like distinction in the Node ecosystem. That all said, man, Create React App does not help here at all. And it does not give developers a good path to solve these problems. So what we're going to talk about today is why Create React App is bad. And then, more importantly, what else could be used that would serve most purposes better. There's a bunch of different solutions that we'll be talking about. Create Next App, Remix's new stacks thing that they just released, as well as I was planning on going into Redwood a tiny bit. I don't think it's the best fit for this, but we're also going to touch on, of course, the Vite and the Vite templates. I think those will be the best drop in. Somebody's touched on CRACO. We'll be touching on CRACO. Don't worry. There's a lot to talk about here. So Svelte's not an alternative to Create React App. Actually, I'm going to, let's start with some ground rules. Ground rules. We are sticking to React. I'm putting this here because a lot of people are going to show up here and say, what about Solid? What about Svelte? What about Vue? What about Angular? What about Quick? Those are all cool things, and we'll talk about them a bunch on every other stream like we always do. But this isn't a stream about Solid. This isn't a stream about Svelte. This is a stream about Create React App and why you shouldn't use it. So no more other things that aren't running React. Astro's on the line, but I think I'm going to throw out Astro here too, because we are talking about React application stuff. Cool. Starting from here, we're sticking to React. We respect the maintainers of Create React App. I want to emphasize this part in particular. They are actually trying. V5 was a huge step, and it genuinely looks like they're trying to take more advantage of standards, remove a bunch of the boilerplate and bullshit, and make ejecting not as miserable as it is. The problem is the community that has been formed around Create React App now expects the bullshit. The brain rot has gotten too deep, and it doesn't matter how hard the maintainers work, they can't reverse that. And I want to emphasize that they are trying, and we are not going after them. The maintainers are hardworking, well-intended open source engineers that are actually doing some crazy stuff considering the whole that CRA is and represents. We respect them. We care about them. They're doing good things. They're arguably doing better than I am because they're making Create React App actually work in modern times. I'm telling you to throw out the code. Give them respect. Be nice to the maintainers. We like them. This is why you shouldn't use Create React App, not why they're bad engineers. I want to be very clear about that. Cool. Trying to think if there's any other ground rules. This is all my opinion. Thankfully, my opinion is right. Cool. I think that is everything. Let's get started. So, what is Create React App? This is a harder question than it might seem initially. Create React App is a weird combination of an opinionated boilerplate, a tutorial, a technical implementation, and a build system, all bundled as a starting point to make a React application. It's rough. There's a lot of good ideas in there. There's a lot of good intent in there, but God, there is way too much code in there. Less commits than I would have expected. I'm sure they squash, but man, the amount of code inside of these packages is a little scary because they have their own custom scripts within Create React App that run on everything. This one's not as scary as it used to be. Some of these are very scary, very long piles of code that do a lot of weird shit to fit all of the different niches and weird things somebody wanted to do with React over the last decade. It's a lot of code, And this does all sorts of different things for all sorts of different potential use cases for all sorts of different package types, build types, systems, NPM, yarn, whatever, assuming that you can do anything within it. And as soon as you can't, you're going to eject and maintain all of this instead. And that's the scariest part of this React scripts. This is a gigantic package full of code that is used to build and maintain the build for a React app with Webpack. And if you want to make a change to your Webpack config or have to do something different from how Create React App expects, you have to eject. And this makes things a lot more painful, a lot faster, because now you have to maintain all of the stuff that came with this before. What eject means is you're not hiding all of this stuff under Create React App anymore. It takes it out and drops it in your source, so now you can deal with it yourself. Also, Swix, don't worry about triggering this. You had good intentions, and one of the core points of what you said, or of what you brought up, is the idea that Node packages do a shit job of distinguishing between what's good for front end and what's good for back end. I've had this problem for a while. I think Node fundamentally failed as a package manager to distinguish between these because it was built for back end use in Node. And now we're retrofitting it to the front end and complaining when things meant for back end don't work in the front end. And Create React App gets stuck in the middle of it and makes the wrong decision about it. And that's why we're here now. So, Create React App. This React scripts shit is very scary, and it's full of chaotic stuff that you don't want to have to maintain yourself. I know this because I've had to do it. It is not fun. When you have to do your first Webpack upgrade yourself, you're in for straight pain. So, because of this, a lot of engineers try to avoid ejecting. Thankfully, there's a solution for them. Create React App Configuration Override. This is one of the scariest packages ever made. What this guy does is patch packages parts of Create React App to let you do things Create React App didn't build in, like styled components. This is an override layer on top of Create React App that assumes an exact version of Create React App. And then you have to rewrite all of the patches when anything changes in Create React App. Instead of going deeper to solve the problem, you've built another layer on top to paint a smiley face over it. This is like layer upon layer upon layer of shit. Just straight garbage. And we need to go closer to the problem, not further away from it. And this is the problem with Create React App. It encourages this culture of taking a problem with your code base and wrapping it with layers instead of fixing the fucking problem. And that's why we're here today. We're fixing the problem. Also, as Swixers pointed out, CRACO is, surprise, surprise, no longer maintained because, surprise, surprise, maintaining this is miserable. When I heard this existed, I think it was actually Jacob who told me this was a thing. I right near had an aneurysm. This is... It's going to be a long stream for me. God, your first exposure to React and Tailwind was Create React App and CRACO. I am so sorry. On behalf of React developers as a whole, I apologize. That's our bad. And that's why I'm doing this, honestly, is I'm trying to turn the tide. I want to make sure the average React developer, if they do recommend Create React App, that at least they feel bad doing it. That's what I want to change. I'm not going to convince everybody to stop recommending this shit, but I should probably be able to convince you to feel bad about yourself while you do it. And I think that's a viable path forward. Cool. So, CRACO somehow makes a bad thing worse, and React scripts is the bad thing. These packages do all sorts of scary shit. All these polyfills. Error overlay's okay, but everyone's copied that at this point. Confusing browser globals. Really great package. Anyways. So, what is Create React App? The recommended way to start a new React application by nobody. Create React App was originally created when React was new, because at the time there wasn't much created in terms of the tools to build your React app. You kind of just had to do it. And that was not great. You had to learn enough Webpack to build everything yourself. And at the time, Webpack was even rougher. As such, you suffered a lot. The Create React App's intent at the time was bundle the majority of what the average developer would need to bootstrap a single page application with React. I should probably make this distinction now. For those that aren't familiar with the single page app versus MPA. Single page app is an application that serves a single HTML file, probably with nothing in it, and then has JavaScript that does everything else. So the JavaScript determines which page you're on. The JavaScript navigates when you click a link. The JavaScript controls the page rather than the HTML that comes down. Multi-page app usually means each page has unique HTML that somehow describes what that page should be, and JavaScript is more there to enhance the experience. So, Create React App is early SPA solution for making a React site. Create React App was a community thing that quickly got adopted by Facebook and is kind of maintained by them. It's dramatic, but yeah, Create React App is the original, like, blessed solution by the React team to get started with a new React application. They tried very hard to abstract a bunch of the core React, or not React, the core build a website problems from you, like configuring Webpack, injecting scripts, bundling SVGs when you import them directly, using new JavaScript like patterns like .map and like new cool like string functions ahead of time, and polyfilling the old one or them on top of old ones for other browsers. A lot of the things that at the time were 100% necessary when we needed a React app that worked on Chrome and an Internet Explorer and as a progressive web app when people thought those were relevant, and Webpack was just getting started, and all of these things were really rough. What has changed since then is we've stopped polyfilling the vast majority of the things that we like to use. We have stabilized our build tools and chain to make JavaScript that works come out of our like build environments. And we have generally moved away from these solutions that obfuscate all of the tech towards ones that simplify it and clarify the role of each piece. On top of all of that, we've seen a revolution in build tools, in particular triggered by ESBuild, which proved that if you abstract your building a little bit away from JavaScript and use something like Golang to do the initial pass of like light polyfilling and compiling to get something to the browser, you can have a way faster developer experience and compilation experience as a result. ESBuild, it was written in Golang by the CTO of Figma, and eventually SWC was written by a Rust developer to be like the Rust equivalent. That developer ended up getting acquired by Vercel and built SWC into NextJS, which means you get the crazy fast developer experience and relatively absurdly fast builds, because that process runs in Rust as much as it can and still falls back on Webpack when it needs to. As such, there's been a lot of movement in this space, and Create React App was not architected in a way where it can keep up, because it was architected to solve a lot of problems before the solutions were standardized. And now when you're buying into it, you're stuck with their assumption around the solution. That is often painful when things like Tailwind happen and their way of using CSS doesn't perfectly line up with the way Create React App thinks about it. And now you have to do weird Webpack like hacks or CRACO fills to get Tailwind to work with Create React App. And as the community continues to innovate and come up with new solutions to the problems that we experience building applications every day, Create React App was not architected in a way where we can build those solutions in. One of the best strengths of React is how simple it is at its core. React provides components and hooks and a rough mental model of how to architect those. Nothing else. React doesn't give you a way to style. React doesn't give you much of a way to manage state. It gives you very basic primitives for it. React doesn't give you anything to manage animation, doesn't give you a build tool, doesn't give you much of anything. It is a JavaScript library for managing the relationship between state and components that then render to the DOM. And that's all it is. I love that simplicity because it's allowed the community to build incredible things like React Query, like Redux, like Zustand and Jodi, like React 3 Fiber, like React Native. There's all of these cool projects that only can exist because React was architected in a way that is open to new additions. The things they didn't do can be done by others and improved and innovated on over time. Create React app is a really hard swing in the other direction. It's building in all of those things so you don't have to make the decisions yourself. And man, the decisions that were made here did not age well at all. And that's the biggest problem with Create React app. Due to React being so minimal and not prescribing solutions, Create React app had to, and it did it very, very early. As a result, it has aged poorly. The maintainers are working to catch it up and struggling because they have to fight the community every step that now expects the weird behaviors that are encoded within. Create React app is a legacy project, and we should treat it as such. With legacy projects, your goal should be never start something new with it, and if you're able, move other things off of it. Let's do a quick good and bad for Create React app. Let's make a diagram. Diagrams are fun. Y'all know how much I love my diagrams. It's a little shorter. Cool. CRA, good and bad. Bad. Cool. So for the good, say simple. Simple, officially supported. Large community. I think that's all I can do there. Bad. No, I need to switch to left align. No SSR story. SSR is server-side rendering. It means that instead of sending down an empty HTML page with JavaScript, you can instead send HTML that actually has content on it initially, which means when you link something on Twitter, it has the metadata in there correctly. To this day, when you share a Twitch stream link, you get shit metadata because that page is cached by another service that isn't in React land that does its best to stuff metadata into the tag when it can. And the result is a hodgepodge of HTML that's cached by various services and gets updated every 48-ish hours. If they were using something like NextJS with a happy SSR story, it would have been trivial to update that HTML on the fly. It's one part that's bad. Ancient decisions around Webpack architecture. Generally, Create React app was built before Webpack was standardized, and it did a lot of things to make Webpack work and make the developer experience good. Like Create React app was one of the first times you could import an SVG directly in your app and expect that to work. But man, they did some rough shit to get there. And that stuff aged very poorly. So what else is bad about Create React app? Ejecting for more control is rough. And it's hard to emphasize just how rough this is. You're now effectively maintaining a fork of Create React app yourself once you eject. And whenever you need to do an update, you have to do that update yourself. And it is not fun. We also trying to think of the right way to put my other Create React app complaints. Maximal and full of things you probably don't need. Yeah, the React docs now mention Next.js. Good call out. Oh, 300 megabytes of NPM or of node modules. Good call. It's it's heavy. Uh, Weird polyfill behaviors set bad expectations. Uh, Honestly, I think that's enough. I don't think we need to go too hard on like the individual bad things. Like I could go deep on why I think their testing story is miserable. Everything has HMR, but yeah, I want to be careful with the good, not doing things that aren't unique to create React app because everything has HMR at this point in dev. It's just an expectation in the React world in particular. So I'm not going to put that there. If we talk about solutions that don't have it, I will rethink my stance. Cool. So now we're going to start talking about alternatives. There's one that a lot of people are hinting at here. Next.js. Yeah, I'm going to get, yeah, people are touching on it, so I'm going to get very lightly opinionated. Based on dated React patterns. React Router, Redux. I want to be clear here. React Router and Redux are fine. They're used by a lot of big companies. They're still getting updates. In particular, RTK for Redux makes the experience of using Redux significantly better. And there are good use cases there. React Router, I personally think is maximal garbage and very rarely is necessary. I much prefer almost anything else personally, but yeah, prescribing so many of these solutions is rough. I'll add one more here. Absurdly or large number of super weird bugs, greater than 1K issues at the moment. Cool. I'll do a React Router rant in the future. I really like, there's a handful of smaller routers. If you want something client side, I really like Wouter. Wouter's dope. It's kind of like Zustand, but for routing. Super, super minimal. It's 1.36 kilobytes gzipped. You don't have to do a top level anything. Route matching is super simple. Love it. Wouter's really good. Highly recommend. Not necessary, just like a good option. I also like React Location. Obviously, shout out Tanner. I want to search all of GitHub. Come on. TanStack, React Location. Cool. React Location is like React Router with a better TypeScript story, higher level navigation, like directives and data hydration through the navigation. It's really cool. Also very considerate of query params in your URLs, which almost no other routing solution is. Very good. Haven't played with it enough. I contributed really, really early, but I haven't had a chance to touch it since. Highly recommend. As realized, I'm covering the star count. I don't have an easy way to not be covering the star count. It's 2.1k stars. Oh. No, I can't do the half screen. Anyways. Yeah. Sorry for the harshness towards React Router. Just not the path I recommend particularly option. Or path I recommend particularly often. It's, yeah. Redux is fine. I used to be much harsher on Redux, but man, the work done on RTK makes it totally viable again. Totally fine now. What's not true about Redux? That Redux isn't mentioned in the Create React App docs. Let's terminal. I don't want to be talking shit if I'm wrong, so let's sandbox, create React app. I'm not dissing RTK. I want to be clear. RTK makes Redux usable again. It's really impressive work that's going on there. Somebody asked about Solid. I'm going to reference the rules here. We are sticking to React today. We're talking about create React app. Going to different frameworks makes this go from slightly off topic to impossible to keep up with. So no. Let's go CRA test. Alternatives to Redux include Zustan, Jodi, a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to link init.tips. That's my site I made a while back to link or to describe a bunch of the solutions I recommend for stuff like this. CD CRA test. What the hell? Did it just not? We no longer support global installs. Great. npm uninstall -g create React app. Great start. Great fucking start. The command you copy off of their website doesn't work. Where's my stupid thing? We're taking away one of the good. Cool. Anyways. Let's see what we're getting in here. Somebody mentioned earlier that they don't recommend Redux anymore. Look at that. I was wrong. They don't have Redux in here anymore. And they moved over to testing library. Still very jest heavy, but at least they're using RTL. Better. As I said, they're improving. Credit where credit's due. Not stuffing a bunch of opinionated state management libraries into your code makes it a lot easier to recommend something like this. Whoever's suggesting Vite, we'll get there. Don't worry. We're talking about all the alternatives in a bit. I'm still on the complaining about create React app stage. Yeah, 1,300 packages. To be fair, Next does have a lot of packages. They hide them. They hide them in a clever way. We'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, this guy's 323.5 megabytes of node modules. Good shit. And they're not doing any native shit either. So that's just like a bunch of JavaScript. That's a little scary. Cool. So I was wrong about some things. I was wrong about some things in favor of Create React App and wrong about more against it there. So I'm happy that I did that. Anyways, Next.js as the first alternative. Let's talk about Next a bit first. Next.js is a framework that was created by, at the time, Vite. I think that Next came before Vite slightly. Vite then became Vercel. The creator of both Vite and of Vercel as well as Next.js, Guillermo Roche, he was the creator of Socket.io. For those that don't know Socket.io, it was one of the first ways to reasonably use WebSockets in Node.js, which became very significant as a, how do I put it? It kind of became the standard for doing WebSockets fast, both because it made deploying the backend on Node incredibly easy, and it would fall back to other methods to maintain the WebSocket connection other than WebSockets for devices that didn't support them yet. It would just do like post requests back and forth to keep an up-to-date state. Very, very good solution to a hard problem early. Nowadays, I don't roll my own socket solution. I use providers like Ably, Pusher, stuff like that. I try to not run a server if I don't have to. If I was running a server, honestly, I'd probably still use Socket.io because I'm familiar with it. I don't know of any great alternative that's like taken over or anything. The reason I brought that up is Guillermo has a phenomenal history as a contributor of open source standards and solutions to common problems. And I've been relying on his stuff for a long time now. I've been following since Socket.io, and Next.js blew me away and scared the shit out of me when it first happened, because I was genuinely a little confused and scared about the idea of turning what felt to me like create React app into a backend, and that scared the shit out of me. I was already scared enough of create React app. The thought of making that your whole service, yeah. And I was wrong. I was incredibly wrong. Next.js solves a lot of the problems we're talking about right now and offers paths to do a lot of cool things create React app can't do. Next.js, cool, I do have the site in my recent history. They refer to themselves as the React framework for production. I think that is a reasonable claim. And this is kind of how it's framed even in the new beta React docs. Actually, plug for those, beta.reactjs.org. I even think I have a chat command. I do not have a chat command. My bad. Was so sure I did. Oh, I do. One of those worked. I don't know which one it was, but one of those commands sends a Fossabot message that shows you the new beta React site. There is no better way to create a React or to learn React right now. Arguably no better way to learn a web dev like solution right now. The new React docs raised the bar for educational materials for getting started with a new technology. Even if you're a seasoned React dev, I recommend reading through these, both because it'll give you better language to teach developers you work with about React, and it might even introduce you to things you didn't know much about before. It's a really good documentation, like upgrade. Rachel killed it. They've been working really hard on this along with a bunch of the other meta developers. Please read this. Very good. Anyways, Next.js is both used in those docs as the solution to build them. So like those docs are built in Next, and it's also recommended in those docs as the way to build your React website. Next effectively does a lot of things, but I'm going to focus on two for the sake of this. One is it runs your React code on the back end so that you can, how do I put it? You can, find the right place to start with this. When you use create React app, do I have to run it? Yeah, I have to run it. This will be way easier. If I cd CRA test npm run dev, npm run start maybe. Cool, start for this. So here we have, once it loads, a create React app. So we see it here, all this React code. If I go here and look into the HTML that I get back, we'll see this HTML has in it this component and the stuff here. However, this is where things get interesting. We're going to go to the network tab and refresh. Here's the actual HTML the server gave us back. Let's take a look at this instead, because this HTML has nothing in it. It has an empty root and a no script tag that says you need to enable JavaScript to run this app. Let's go do a next app instead. cd npx create next app ts next test. cd create next. All right, cd next test is what I named it. Cool. npm install, npm run dev. And another dumb thing one of these things does, the TypeScript template for Node or for Next.js doesn't include the node types that it needs. Wonderful. Complain about this all the time. Cool. So now if I refresh localhost 3000, I'm going to get the next site instead, because this is the Next.js template. If I go to the elements here, like I was doing before, you'll see, obviously, this is all the HTML for the page as a next root. And from here, it works pretty much identical to any site. The difference is, in the network tab, scroll up, prettify, we actually get the HTML for the page from the server. It is absurdly more valuable for things like scraping, the speed of the initial page, the metadata that would be shared when you share a link on Twitter, when you share a link on Discord. This lets you make sure the first version of the page the user sees has actual HTML in it. This will boost your SEO. This will boost the quality of experience for a user when they load the page. This will prevent a bunch of the flicker and shit like that that happens when you load a page for the first time. And this will let you have a page with data the first time it's loaded. It's incredibly powerful. And it's also entirely optional. At any point in a Next app, and I'll just go do this quick because why not? I have a folder here, pages. I'm gonna make a new folder, components. We're going to rip all of the contents from this page and throw them in home.tsx. This now exports default function home, and in here, delete all this, dynamic from next dynamic, import components home, cool, auto completed, SSR false. Also have to bind this. Const lazy home component equals, and then return lazy home component. And now we have successfully recreated create React app because the div now has nothing in it when it initially comes back from the server. Ta-da! We have now created create React app inside of NextJS. These now behave exactly the same. It's like if you have packages that you actually can't run on server, import them through dynamic with SSR false. Now this won't run on server. And if I from here down do everything just like create React app does, I can do that. I can even install React router on inside of that file if I want, and I can tell in a next config file, tell next, hey, send everything to root, just point everything here, and then we'll make up routes as we please. And you've now forced create React app out of next, but you don't have to use all of their weird build chain bullshit and instead have relatively modern standards for package management, build, etc. There are things that you'll have to deal with if you're using the CRACO solution, like the weird way material UI works there and like polyfills and shit. But generally speaking, any relatively modern tool, you can npm install inside of Next, and it will probably do what it's supposed to. And if it doesn't, there's a really good guide somewhere. And that's why I think it's okay to recommend Next as an alternative to create React app. So let's go back to here. So the good. Very modern, well invested, or I'm trying to remember the way to put it, like React meta endorsed well maintained, incredibly so, very modern, meta endorsed, well maintained, SSR golden path. Stain standards, backend solutions / API, TRPC, etc. I don't want to make that long. Multiple render strats, great caching story, insanely fast builds. Yeah, there's a lot there. I don't want to just like make this React or Next great because there's a lot of bad I want to complain about too. So let's start with here. ESM story still confusing. Type or unclear boundaries between front, back. I think that because Next does such a great job of like blurring the front end and back end to smooth out the developer experience between the two, it often gets confusing which side your code will run in. And and for a lot of developers, it's unintuitive that the thing in your page component, like the component code, is running on the back end as well in order to make that first HTML pass. And that confusion definitely leads to developers not understanding like which packages and which things work where. So it leads to confusion around what you can use where. ESM is the new ECMAScript module standard. It's meant to replace CommonJS as how we bundle a JavaScript thing to share it with others as a package. Yeah. No clear state management, and you start with 80 kilobytes gzipped. Yeah, those are actually good points. No obvious state management path. Get server side props is largely an anti-pattern. Light vendor lock-in. No obvious, I'm leaning. I'm not as sure about the state management path one. I think all of these have that problem. Now, especially now that Create React App gutted Redux out, I think all of these have that at this point. Get server-side props doesn't do a good job of hydrating that state, but yeah. Yam touched on the package stuff. The interesting thing about how Next.js manages their packages is if we look at the package JSON, this is suspiciously small, and even the package lock is relatively small for something as big as Next. The reason for that is in the Next.js package directly, they actually, during their build, will pull in specific versions of the packages they need and bundle that into Next directly, not as a sub-dependency through Node, but an actual compiled in file. So you don't have to manage the dependency. It's abstracted as part of Next's runtime and build chain. This means that if you want to make changes to those things, you're fucked. I'll be frank, you cannot do that. But for what it is worth, and I have done some crazy hacks, I have found that that layer is much deeper than what Create React App represents. Let me actually go back to my diagrams here, because I think I can diagram this okay. Cool, we have a stroke. So here is the circle. I'll make a bigger circle. I'll call this one the problem space. This is where the problems anyone might have with their build solution exist, in this circle. Next's prescriptions live way deeper in here. Let me change the color so it's visible. Next's prescriptions, or Next solution, is a smaller like piece in here, and I can build around it. If my problem exists outside of Next solution, I can build in. And here's where my problem is. I've always felt as though Create React App exists in this outer layer out here that contains a lot of other people's random problems and shit, but might not solve my problem perfectly. So if my problem exists on this layer and Create React App is this much further out, I'm fucked. I have to do some crazy shit. And this is where you start seeing like CRACO, which is effectively a crack inside of the framework so that I can inject my way into the problem space where I actually live. But now I've fractured Create React App to get there. And the next time I need to do something in that space I fractured, everything starts to fall apart. But Create React App exists so far around the problems with build that I find it nigh impossible to do anything that wasn't prescribed within. Next solutions are a small enough subset of the problem space that you can usually npm install the thing you want and expect it to work. Does that make sense? This was a weird way to frame it. I hadn't thought of this one before. I think this makes sense. In my head, it does. Cool. But yeah, that's why I'm okay with, for the most part, or Next hiding the packages that it uses underneath and not letting me deal with them. I don't want to, and they make it so I don't feel like I need to. When I try to npm install something, it almost always does what it's supposed to. The exceptions being backend code in the front end, where the you be better about what you import where. One of the problems we ran into was we had a package that only works on front end because it calls window directly. It's like for WebSocket stuff on the client. And we had a component that used that package, and it also used, or it also exported a type that we wanted in the back end. So we imported this front end type in the back end, and that was coming with the package call with window in it. So that was failing to build. Cool. Let's hop back to these alternative solutions quick. I'm deleting this thing. I don't need it anymore. Y'all know what circles look like. Cool. Let's yoink. I'll yoink the whole thing. It makes this easier. I'll talk about Vite. Next, Vite. Gonna do this no, or SSR is rough, just like 2 points so I can keep the text here and not have to worry about that. But yeah, Vite, it's Vite. They say it's Vite, just like GIF is GIF. Sometimes the creators are wrong. Vite is a build tool for creating web applications. Some use it for servers, but it's primarily used for web apps. It's built for bundling everything from your CSS to your JavaScript to your like whatever as simply as possible. It's this is the drop-in for Create React app. It's not built for server side at all. There are some hacks that are making it somewhat work with SSR stuff. I don't recommend them. I don't think anyone does. Generally, Vite was built to take the experience similar to Create React app. It's more what the Vue world was using, and take advantage of Golang with ESBuild to make the time from when you save to when you see a response on the screen as fast as possible, and using rollup for the official builds so that you can have a minimized production build that we can confidently know is going to work, because rollup's been used forever. Rollup works. I bring up Vite. Y'all say it's French, whatever. I'm calling it Vite. I bring up Vite because although it was originally built around and for Vue, I still remember the tweet when Evan Yu said, "Hey, I'm trying to make Vite work with React. Does any React developer want to try this?" And I was one of the first people to use React with Vite, and it was so cool when it happened. Vite is incredibly minimal, one of the simplest and fastest ways to build a React application for the first time. My favorite part is how little it obfuscates without increasing complexity. In the Vite template, you get an actual index HTML that actually has the source main.jsx file here, and Vite will see that, start at the HTML, find that JavaScript and compile it if it needs to, and spit out something that actually works on the client. It's very elegant and fast as shit, and the templates it has are simple as hell. When I want something that I know I will never need to care about the condition of the HTML from the server for, I use Vite still. It's so quick. It will give you your static HTML and static JavaScript that you need to build your dynamic SPA faster than almost anything else on the market. And for things like an Electron app or a game, I would still probably use Vite. For my game Dogecoin Simulator, which I'm realizing more and more, nobody knows I have a bunch of random games. Yeah, here's Dogecoin Simulator. I just realized it's zoomed in too much. I don't have the ability to reset easily now, but it's like a cookie clicker game about Doge that I thought would be funny. And I was right, it was, but nobody played it. I made this with Vite because it doesn't even have multiple pages. It has one page. It's a web app. I don't need to server render anything here. It's actually almost simpler that I didn't. So for some use cases, this is good. It's fast as hell. I saw somebody ask about Parcel. I haven't seen anyone use Parcel in so long. Like, I know they just got a recent update that uses ESBuild for some of its stuff. It exists. I don't think anyone's particularly excited about Parcel right now, and for good reason. It's not keeping up. I saw SWC come up. SWC is very similar to ESBuild. It's the Rust equivalent. It is built into Next.js now. It's fine. Yeah. Generally, Vite is, if you want to own your build system at all, and you don't want to SSR, Vite is the best solution. I'm actually gonna go through these quick and give the like why I would use which and when, because that'll be useful to have separately. Because I think the good and bad helps, but it's not as explicit as I want to be. When to use, make this bigger. When to use create React app. So here's when you would use create React app. The code base is already CRA and you are underpaid. When to use Vite. SSR will never be a concern. Owning your build could potentially be valuable. Electron. Raw speed. Simple. Yeah, so I would use Vite if SSR would never be a concern. You need to own your build, and raw speed is very valuable. Cool. And let's see, next.js. I would use next.js if HTML, metadata, SEO, Lighthouse, or general first paint perf matter. If you don't want to think about this problem much anymore and you want to use what everyone's started, or what if you want to use the new standard. So usually next is going to be the thing you want to use, almost always. I'll give an honorable mention to Remix. If you really liked React Router, I'm going to stop doing the ifs. So Remix, you really liked React Router. Edge rendering is V important to you, and bleeding edge isn't that scary. I'm not saying Vite is better than Next.js. I'm saying Vite is simpler than Next.js. And if simple is fine with you, you should probably use Vite. But if you need to like build an actual application people are going to use, and you want like Google to work for your site, you should probably be on Next, or maybe Remix. I'll say, I'm going to add one more to Remix. All of Next's stuff applies. It's not all of Next stuff because the standard thing isn't true. Yeah, I'll leave that as is. So here's the thing that you can like screenshot and put on Twitter and try and cancel me for. Here is when I would use each of these different solutions. If it's just SEO, then there's libraries for that, so Vite is fine. No, not really true. You can kind of server render Vite pages in some ways, just wrong. Like it's very unsupported. Evan himself has said that it's not the intended use case for Vite at the moment. It yeah. Saw Green Scars ask a really good question. I'm a backend dev who really likes the concept of SPAs. What's an instance where SSR is clearly the better choice? Anytime the metadata that comes down the wire matters, SSR is a better choice. So a great example for this would be Twitch. If I change my title on Twitch and I go, actually, I'll just do it now. I'll go to the Twitter link preview. On Twitter, there's a card validator. And you can see what this looks like. The title's actually updated because I haven't changed it in a week, but I'm going to go change my title. Create React app is bad and slow. I just changed my stream title. I'm going to do this again. And it's not going to update. It's going to take a very long time to update that title because the page isn't being SSR'd. The data it's getting from that is some other backend code that every once in a while generates a new HTML asset with slightly different metadata in it if it feels like it. Whereas with an SSR solution, the HTML you get from the wire is something you have control over directly. Yeah, this won't be updated for 24 to 48 hours usually. It's rough. What's my general take on Gatsby? Gatsby's still alive. News to me. Astro's using Vite. Good points. A bunch of other things are using Vite under the hood. It's a pretty good like solution to build your own solution over. Does Remix use React Router? Yes, Remix is React Router. It's like Remix is React Router with data built in as a backend solution. It's like Remix is it's by the React Router team and built around React Router as a whole. Cool. Migration methods. How do we get out of a Create React app? The first thing I would recommend determining is, okay, so we're convinced. How do we stop using CRA? Step one is obviously pick your new solution. The criteria I would consider are, do you want your site to come up when you Google it? Do you want the data in links that people send to your site to be fresh and up to date? Do you have concerns around the experience that how do I put it? What is like the reasonable JavaScript target for your average user? Like, are they running a really old Internet Explorer device? Are they running a modern phone? Are they usually going to be on a computer? And from there, probably fall on NextJS because it's the thing that has the right overlap of that, as well as probably the most important thing, hireability. So I'll under here, questions to ask. How important is SSR? Do you need metadata? Do you need static renders? How important is hiring? What other questions could you ask yourself as you're making this migration? How bought into weird client only packages are you? Material UI is hell from what I know. Apparently old Material UI builds rely heavily on weird CRACO shit that is annoying to do in like Next.js. I would imagine it'd be slightly easier in Vite. Not positive about that. The Google thing is part of the SSR. Do you need metadata? Google embed, etc. Also, end user device isn't perf yet. How important is perf? Old devices for users. I don't think Material UI is something you should ever use. I don't want to go too in depth on like my hatred of the average like UI frameworks, but a future stream I'll rant about Material UI. For now, I just don't recommend it. Cool. So based on these questions, if metadata is important, static HTML's if any of the SSR needs are potentially important, you now have to pick between Remix and Next. And if hiring's important, you should probably pick Next. If you're using weird client-only packages or other things that you're like intimately familiar with that have client expectations or otherwise have problems running on a server or server-generated code, use Vite, but almost nobody will do that. There are very few things that have that problem still. I think we're in a good state. Create React app has assumptions built in, and I'm assuming you have those assumptions. How do I put it? If you are bought in enough to those assumptions, like you have a lot of different routes in your React router, you have a bunch of weird polyfills and plugins that you're expecting. Your code base has more than 10,000 lines of code and you don't quite know where those 10,000 lines are. If any of that sounds like you, it might make a lot of sense to encode those old assumptions into the solution you pick. So if you go with Next.js, for example, Next.js, say SPA. Cool. Found a guide. Oh, Colin wrote this. That's hilarious. For those that don't know, Colin is the creator of Zod, and he wrote the initial commits that became TRPC. He writes a lot of the basis for a lot of the things that I thrive and survive off of. So huge shout out to Colin Hacks. Great developer. Yeah. Did not think Zod would be the one to write this, or the Colin would be the one to write this. This is also a strategy I know Tanner Lindsley, who created React Location, as well as React Query, React Table, and a bunch of other libraries. He's been using Next.js as a build tool for single-page apps for a while now. And yeah, Mabel just said, if they keep the fundamental idea of minimal core that you can't override without some third-party tool that might break later or being exposed to an explosion of config, CRA will continue to suck. Yeah. The fact that to change something within their assumptions, you have to eject or hack is incredibly scary. And enough of those suggestions are far away from what I as a developer need that it regularly frustrates me. And when I'm advising new developers, I find that they regularly enough run into those problems that Create React App causes more pain than it solves. And that's been a frustration for me for a while. Once we pick the new solution, I don't want to keep diagramming this in here. It's not that important. What you could do with Next.js, which is really cool, is instead of routing everything through the page files, you can do what we did in the example earlier, where we have index.tsx, lazy load something else. This something else could have a React router inside of it, and then you can, let's see if, yeah, it's going to complain about those things. Where's the config? Here's the config. You redirect any route to go to your destination. And as long as you do this, you are effectively converting all of the routes to point to that one static page you made and effectively turning this into create React app, theoretically, if you're not using any weird shit, you would be able to copy paste the root and the entire code base from your create React app here, return the root in this dynamically mounted home, and that would behave nearly identically to create React app. At which point you can start opting out individual routes, buying into Next's routing if you choose to, and moving more in a server-side Next.js direction. Or you could not do that, keep doing things the way you've always done it, and work directly within the create a React router that you pulled in there. I will say the React router experience, if you do plan on staying on it, is likely going to be better in Remix. I have heard some rough stories of moving from create React app to Remix for other reasons around dependencies and expectations with those, and weirdness with how Remix hydrates CSS and expects like CSS and JS to work. I don't know too much about that. I'm not deep enough in the Remix community. And even if I was, the solutions that it breaks are things I don't recommend. So this isn't a thing I personally wouldn't recommend Remix for, but you should be considerate if you want to keep using React Router very heavily around which parts, how do I put this? If you're using Create React App and you're really bought into React Router, look at the other things you're really bought into and make sure people have happy paths for that in Remix if that's the direction you choose to go. Generally, I find Next.js and Vite both have happy paths for almost anything big, and I've made both work for all sorts of weird shit. I don't have the same confidence in Remix, largely because I haven't used it as much. So know that that exists. Hell, love me some Vite, though. Really missing HMR in Remix. Yeah, I forgot about that point with Remix. That's actually a really good point. That's painful. Remix doesn't, for those that don't know, HMR is hot module reload. It means that if you have a page that you're deving on, or doing development on with 15 things in it, and you change one component, that one component can change without the whole page re-rendering. I rely on this heavily in dev now. This is one of the things that Dan Abramov from Redux, who's now core React team, worked really hard on, was making sure as a React developer, you could keep your React DOM stable while making changes within it. It makes dev really fast and a generally great experience. I couldn't live without it personally, but when your solution's really fast, I can see why people would push against it. It also introduces potential impossible states where you change an init, it doesn't hot reload the init level, and you end up in a weird, erroneous state between the two. Do I like Remix again? I'll go on this rant eventually. Since I started hanging out with the community more and seeing what they're doing, I'm much more hyped on the potential. I hadn't seen how the primitives could be misused. And I think that's one of the most important things for me. I've complained about the React or the Next.js docs forever. They don't admit to the weaknesses of Next, and they don't encourage good practice around them. Remix doesn't either, and that's fine. Remix's docs are way better, though, which is why it hurts more, in my opinion. Since Remix's docs tell you exactly how you should use Remix, it's hard to get insight on how you probably shouldn't, but would be able to do a lot of cool stuff with. Seeing people obfuscate and reverse engineer the loader and the loader pattern and I forgot their mutation pattern. It has a different name, but hijacking those to do a TRPC type solution is really cool. Or somebody like Maple and the cool type definition stuff and generics they've built to make a good story between the front and back in Remix. The community is doing really cool stuff there, and I don't want to discount that. It resolves a lot of my complaints with the framework. That all said, it's not where I need it to be, and I'm concerned about the maintaining team and some of the decisions they're making, in particular around the optics and the community management. If Remix succeeds, it's because of the community and the people working really hard to do awesome stuff with it. Yeah. There's a future where I really like Remix, but we're not in that future just yet. So we're going to keep talking about these things. Cool. So have we exhausted the Create React App topic? Time to move on. because we're how many hours in? 2 hours in since I hit go live,